From County College of Morris, this is CCM All Access.
Hello, and welcome to CCM All Access, the show that brings you news and information from the County College of Morris. Students at CCM, members of the community, people doing good things. I'm Brenda Todd, and joining me today is Vivyen Ray, who is the Vice President for Human Resources and Labor Relations here at CCM. Welcome.
Thank you, Brenda. Good to be here.
Well, so I know that you're new in this position, is that right?
That's right, 6 weeks.
6 weeks, okay,
Yes.
so you're a new hire too. So you dealt with CCM's Human Resources Department just recently before you came here, right?
Absolutely.
So tell us a little bit about that position.
The Vice President has responsibilities for the employee life cycle from the moment someone can, like me as a new candidate, from the moment someone thinks of the college as a place they'd like to work to the moment they separate from the college, either in terms of retirement or they look for another position or they decide to do something else with their lives. And it's everything from making sure that they are looking at an ad in a paper or online to apply for the job, to vetting those resumes when they come in, to interview them when they come in for jobs, to make sure that if they are hired for a position, they go through an employee orientation so they understand the employment of the college. If they have any issues in terms of with their supervisors or coworkers, the employee relations part of the job is one of a mediation responsibility to make sure that people work in the best environments that they can possibly work in. When they think about wanting to do other positions with the college, and if they need a degree, for example, Human Resources is responsible for the waiver program and the tuition reimbursement program. We have responsibility for labor relations, and that's everything from negotiating the labor relations contracts to being the contract administrator. So if a employee who's a member of a union has an issue at work and they want it resolved, Human Resources involved in helping them to do that.
Okay, so you have a staff then?
I do.
Okay, and about how many people?
7 people.
There? And where are they on the campus?
In the HH. I can't remember what it's called.
HH, Henderson Hall.
Henderson Hall.
Yes.
Edit that out.
That's okay. That's absolutely fine. That's absolutely fine. So you're new here, and where did you come
That's why I didn't know Henderson
Of
Hall.
course. Of course.
Yes.
So, so where did you come from before you came here?
Hudson County Community College.
Okay. And then you were at colleges before that too.
I was. Real short story. I was laid off from private industry in 2009. I worked for ADP and I always wanted to get into higher ed. So instead of going off and getting another job right away at a consulting company, I used all the skills I'd learned in about 30 years in corporate America and was a human resources consultant and a training and development professional. The getting into higher ed part, folks told me that the best way to get in is as an adjunct. So the first place I was hired was Essex County Community College, where I taught a variety of different courses for them. Warren County was after that. I ended up being full-time at Bergen for about 3 years as a lecturer. One of my clients was the College of Mount St. Vincent. They had a leadership development program, and while I was there, they asked me to be an adjunct there as well. And their human resources person left, and they asked me if I wanted to work for them full time.
Wow.
And I had I wasn't thinking about going back working with anybody full time, but it was a great opportunity. So I was there for a couple of years. It was a terrible commute. I live in West Orange.
Okay. Yeah.
So I started applying to colleges here in New Jersey and was hired by Hudson County Community College. Was hired as an executive director, and when I left them recently, I was the assistant vice president for employee relations.
Oh, fantastic. So you've had quite a journey.
I have.
Yeah. So what did you think of teaching?
I love teaching. I still do it. I teach a human resources course at Essex on the weekends. Absolutely love it. It's not what I expected it to be. With most of my experience being with adults, and meaning older adults in a corporate environment, I actually thought that those same skills that you use teaching a 40-year-old were the same skills that you use teaching an 18-year-old, and they really are not. They really are not.
Oh, that's very interesting.
Yeah. Yes, I made a lot of mistakes in my first year or so, not understanding why they didn't understand my assessment instrument. But they weren't appropriate for the classes I was teaching.
Right.
But as an adjunct, I think that's what you do. You try what you know first, and then if you're lucky, like I was, you get mentors and coaches, who'll come to your classroom and do an evaluation and give you feedback so you can get better.
That's the case in any position, right?
That's right.
Right.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
That's
So
right.
then you said it's a lot different teaching a 20-year-old or a 40-year-old or a 60-year-old.
Yes.
So what are some of the differences there?
There's more facilitation when you teach a 40-year-old because they have life experience
Right.
already, and you're just reminding them of what they already know
Mm-hmm.
and how they applied it and how maybe they can apply it better. A 18-year-old may not have the life experience, so you may be introducing them to a topic completely different than
Right.
what they thought it might be, and it's opening them up for exploration, whereas with someone who is 40, they've had the exploration, but now you're going to talk
Sure.
about how you've used it in life.
Sure. Exactly. So you also have like over 25 certifications, is that right? And what you
Yes.
want to tell us about some of those? And where did you get them?
Okay.
Yeah.
So one of the things you should know about me is I'm a lifelong learner. So there is not a course that I won't go to,
That's
no matter
pretty
where.
clear.
Yes,
That's pretty
yes.
clear.
Stay in a classroom somewhere. Most of them are in like adult education. So for example, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People was a book that was published in 1987, and it launched a whole organization, the Covey organization. They have themselves about 10 or 15 courses that I got certified in, and they're all around leadership development and coaching. So for example, they have one course that I really like that's called the Leadership Series. It's 5 courses within a larger course, and it's everything from thinking of who you are as a leader and how you can improve upon that, to making sure that you have a mission for your team, that you inspire your team to be able to perform better, that you look at the key performance indicators that your particular unit has, and how you can make sure that you meet the numbers, whatever the numbers happen to be. At a college, for example, the numbers may be the number of students that are enrolled or that are retained. In private industry, it may be your sales figures that you want to accomplish from each year.
So when teaching the students and talking about the importance of leadership, what are some of the things that students can do to facilitate that skill of being a leader?
Being a leader? Well, the first thing is there's a difference between being a manager and a leader. A manager is expected to maintain the resources they have and try to get a product or a service out on a day-to-day basis. A leader is really about inspiring people to act when you're not even there. With a manager, sometimes you have to show up and tell people what to do. If you're a good leader, people know what to do, and in absence of you, they will still do what they have to do. A leader has their hands off, and part of what I think students can learn is if you trust people, if you've trained them appropriately, if you've given them the tools that they need, if they trust you and you trust them, people show up in ways that you don't expect they will.
Right. Yeah, so I know that part of another certification you had was in employee relations, right? So tell us about employee relations and how your position with that.
The employee relations course is actually through the Public Employee Relations Commission, which is PERC.
Okay.
PERC is the body in the state that oversees public employees. So for example, at this college we have 5 contracts. So PERC decides what a labor relations issues might be, and if you go on their website, you can see that you can do this and you can't do that. So the employee relations course is really about understanding what the laws are, how they apply to the employees you have, understanding how to negotiate and what is a fair practice and an unfair practice. It also introduces you to the agency itself, which was founded, I think, in 1975. So it's a fairly new agency in the state.
So you're also certified to give a 360 assessment. And so tell us, what is that? Because most people in the corporate world, they're going to run into a 360 assessment.
Yes, and the first time you have one is very sobering.
Right.
What a 360 is feedback with everyone who has a relationship with you. So if you are a supervisor, it's the people that report to you. Is your boss giving you feedback? It's your colleagues giving you feedback. And if you have either internal or external clients, they give you feedback as well. There's an aggregate done of all of their feedback, and then you get an assessment of how well you're doing in your leadership role. Most of them have comments that you can add to it, and the comments will be specific things that people are looking for in terms of what they expect from you or what they like about what you do. And as a result of it, you get leadership development. You can look at the areas where you have to grow, and you can do better in the areas where you've mastered.
So what are the guidelines then for those people assessing a coworker?
Be honest. Sometimes it's the only opportunity that people can give you feedback. Most human beings, in my experience, have difficulty telling someone directly to their face how they feel.
Sure.
And if it's your supervisor, you know, it may not be particularly career enhancing if you did that.
Right.
So what a 360 allows you to do anonymously is to give feedback to someone that really needs to hear how they've interacted with you and whether it's been effective or not effective. So once you get the feedback, that's where the coaching comes in. Some people can look at the feedback and decide on their own what their development is going to be. Others need a coach to say, you know, get past what people said and think about how you're going to grow as a result of what they heard.
Right. So how does that work in a college setting or an educational setting? So, for example, for a professor, would it be the professor's peers?
It would be. You don't typically use the peers. In a college environment, for example, you'll have a classroom assessment. So one of your peers will come into the classroom and observe your class and then give you feedback based on that. Students will give an assessment of the class as well, generally at the end of the semester. And then there's this horrible thing called Rate My Professor. You get feedback on that one too.
Well, it can be a good thing or a bad thing. I guess that people can be very honest there,
yes,
but, you know, depending on their own experience.
Absolutely.
Right. Okay, well, thank you. We're going to take a quick break and stay tuned. We'll be back in a moment.
I'm Andrea Lucia, a graduate of County College of Morris. At CCM, I gained a high-quality education, was involved with clubs on campus, and performed university research in tissue engineering. My CCM education prepared me for ongoing success. Today, I am at Cornell University, studying engineering and performing research in cardiac tissue engineering. The professors and staff at CCM helped me to start right and finish strong.
And we're back on CCM All Access. I'm Brenda Todd, and we're here with Vivyen Ray. So Vivyen, I'd like to get back to your certifications. One of them is a workplace mediator. Now, how was that course, and what does that entail?
When I signed up for the course, I thought it was one that would help me be a contract mediator for union negotiations.
Right.
It actually was not that at all. It's really about conflict mediation. It's really how to de-escalate conflicts before they get to something really bigger.
Sure.
So it's about the conversations you have with the two people that may have a dispute. It is allowing for two things. One, where we have to respect each other, and one where we can't walk away if the conversation gets difficult. And the role of the mediator is to make sure that that happens. That if you and I were in a conflict and the mediator was here in the room, I would respectfully tell you everything I needed to tell you about why the conflict occurred. Then I'd be quiet while you did exactly the same thing. And what the mediator would help us to do is to find out what we wanted to do about that. Is there some place in the middle where we can meet? And I find that using those tools de-escalates a lot of things that could be bigger because you're allowing people to really talk about how they feel.
I think I had a family meeting like that last night. And so it was a similar thing.
Yes.
I was like, okay. So that's good. That's good for every situation.
It really is. It really is.
So tell us about your life in corporate America.
My life in corporate America was fabulous. I was in the beginning of a lot of things. Team development was really big. SHRM, which is the Society for Human Resources Management, was just beginning when I began my corporate career. I had two terrific role models who couldn't be more different from each other. My first really professional position in HR, my first supervisor was an ex-football player. His name was Jimmy Jones, and he played for the Giants. And Jimmy did like locker room talk, basically try to rev me up. And my other great leader was a man whose name was John Hogan, who was with ADP. And I remember John believed that leaders have a vision and that leadership is different than management. And he committed every year to 4 leadership events where all of the people who were, quote, leaders in the organization were required to learn how to be better. He would expect that we read books like the Leadership Challenge as an organization. We read something called the Oz Principle as an organization. And then we would sit and have intellectual discussions about how that applied to what we did on a day-to-day basis. He would tell us that at the point that you don't want to be a leader, it's when you show him that you're no longer interested in learning how to be better, that you've decided that you're done. And I remember during 9/11, it was the financial services industry I was working at the time, and John was actually on the phone with someone from Cantor Fitzgerald, and he didn't know for about 2 weeks whether that person survived the towers or not. And I remember him coming to one of our vision team meetings and asking us, do you remember the song, I Hope You'll Dance? I love country western music. So he started quoting some of the words in the song and said, at the end of the day, work is important, but your family is really more important. And it's times like that tragedy when you really should be focused on making sure that your home is solid. And work will take care of itself, but make sure you go home and hug your kids and kiss your wife and your husband.
He knew his priorities.
He certainly did,
Exactly. And that sounds like that role for you fed right into your lifelong learning.
It did. It did. Yeah. When I was hired for it was an internal consultant to the vision team. So the vision team were middle managers. There were about 25 of us that met on a monthly basis. And my job was to make sure that they did continuous learning. So the cool thing about it was I got to go off and get certified on courses. I didn't always deliver them, but I was the person that would go to see whether they were worthy of being offered back to the organization. I got to recommend a lot of courses, and one of my favorite courses was the Oz Principle and OZ, like the Wizard of Oz. And actually the book is based on those. That's my favorite movie. And the book is actually based on how self-evolved Dorothy was. She didn't know she was, but she was really very self-evolved. She was actually the leader of a team of 4 men. And if it wasn't for them, they wouldn't have achieved their goals. And it taught us that to be a leader, you have to be responsible not only for yourself, but for other people. And we spent about a year reading the book and looking at the principles of the Oz Principle and making sure it was a better environment. I told you about the 7 habits and the courses I took with Stephen Covey. There's an organization called the Blanchard Organization. Kim Blanchard wrote the 10-Minute Manager, one of the first management books I ever read. And my favorite leadership book, which is also a workshop, is the Leadership Challenge. It has these 5 different exemplary talents that a leader is supposed to have. So it's all about learning how to be better myself. I didn't start off in my first position being a really good leader. I was a good manager, but I really wasn't a good leader. And as a result of my first 360 and trying to figure out how I got to be who I was and how others got to be who they were, that actually started this lifelong learning thing for me. Like, human beings are really interesting people.
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, as you talk about leaders, I always wonder, we focus on leadership a lot in school, and there's leadership seminars and all this, but everyone's not a leader, and everyone can't be a leader. So what is it okay to not be a leader, right?
It is okay.
And how do you fit into in a situation like that where you're being pushed to be a leader? There have to be those who follow and who carry out the leader's wishes.
In corporate, we call them individual contributors. So you can be a really terrific individual contributor, and you can support a leader. So you're right, everybody doesn't have to be one. I believe in the role that I have now and the roles that I've had to be in, that I have to be a leader. And again, I've been exposed to some really good ones. Some really, really good ones. So for me, it wasn't a choice. It was something I had to be. Right.
But in HR, you are looking at those people who are leaders and those people who are individual contributors.
That's right. That's right. And sometimes if you're really, really good at your job as an individual contributor, someone makes a decision that you should be in a leadership role, but you need the support to be able to grow to be that. So all my history is about being a person that would provide that kind of support.
Right. So I feel like we're working a little bit backwards here, I guess. But tell us about your education.
So long story short, I started off as a college student who was a history major. And it was a result of a really terrific middle school history teacher I had. But once I got to college, you don't just study American history, you have to study everything else. And I had no interest in everything else. So I said, well, maybe I don't want to do history. My second thing was I was really good with bookkeeping. I thought bookkeeping and accounting were the same thing. They are not. So, so two things that I thought I wanted to be, and then found out I wasn't that. So I ended up going to a cooperative education program, and I wanted to be in a teacher's program, and I didn't make the teacher's program, but they did have a cooperative education program. And that required that you worked at a place that would hire you after you graduated from college, and you would work a semester and go to school a semester. I ended up doing inside sales. I was really good at it. I didn't like it, not one day, but I made a lot of really good money. And I worked with people who had been doing that job for 20 or 30 years, and at break time they'd complain about the job and what they would have done if you've got a chance to do something else. I would hear that almost every day, and I said, I'm going to listen to these people.
Yes, sure.
So I went to apply for a job, and I didn't know human resources was a thing at all, but I went to apply for a job that I was overqualified for and paid about half of what I was making at that time. And the person who I learned later was the human resources manager said I was wasting her time and mine, and she asked me why I was there. And I gave her that story. I'm working in a job that I really don't like, and working with people that don't like it either, and they've been doing it a long time. And I really don't know what I want to do. So at that point, I was going to the Community College of Baltimore. She told me to go to Career Services. They have these tests you can take, which will match your career interest with your personality, and will identify maybe 4 or 5 things you might be good at. And it identified human resources. So I looked for colleges that had a program, and the only place that had a accredited program in human resources at that time was the University of Baltimore. So I took a risk and quit my job. I had some money saved, and I begged family and friends for the rest of it. So if I worked it, I could get it all done in 1 year and finish all my credits and graduate. So I took a year off from working. I did a summer internship with one of the companies I ended up working for full-time with Gannett. And I lived in Baltimore, Maryland. The job for Gannett was in Rochester, New York.
Oh.
They had interviewed me for a full-time job, and it was to do college placement, because I'd done college placement before at another job I had. But because I didn't have my college degree at that time, they said, we don't feel comfortable sending someone to recruit college graduates who has not graduated herself. And that was part of the reason I went back to school full-time. Was I kept hearing that. We like you got great experience, but you don't have your degree. So when I went back to college full-time, they didn't find any other candidate they liked better than me, and said, we'll hire you. We know you don't have your degree yet, but we'll hire you and move you to Rochester. And I said, no, I'm taking off a year. I'm taking off this year. I'll come back to you in January or February when I'm done, and hopefully there'll be an opportunity for me. They ended up calling me in May and said, can you work for us during the summer? And I said, no, I have to take a whole year. I have to go every blessed semester they have. So I'm going to summer school. Well, when are you going to summer school? I was going 2 days a week. Well, how about if we flew you up to Rochester on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and fly you back to Baltimore on Tuesday and Thursday so you can go to school?
Wow.
Yeah. So who says no to that?
Right, absolutely.
Yeah, so for 3 months I did that, and then in the fall I would go up maybe one day a week for them. And then they offered me a full-time position in January the following year. And that job was as a college placement. It seems like I was always going to be in colleges now that I think about it. So I ended up being the college placement officer, mostly working with schools that were Hispanic serving, the historically black colleges and universities, and the colleges that have a high enrollment of Asian students. We also were publishing USA Today for the first time, so when I wasn't on the college campuses, I went to a lot of conventions and helped pitch USA Today, which was a new product during that time. Did that for about 2 years, and then I got my first opportunity to be, at that time it was personnel manager for the New York office for the Gannett Company. I was there from overall for about 13 years and had gotten to executive director human resources and training, and then I went for my master's degree at Fordham. One of my professors worked for ADP, and he taught us the course in consulting. And he and I used to monopolize the course and from the other students, because we would argue about who was right and who was wrong, whose experience was more valid. And he said to me, "You think you're smart?" And I said, "I am smart." So he said, "We need really smart people at ADP. Can I have your resume?" So I ended up going to ADP after a month of giving him the resume.
Wow.
Was with ADP for about 13 years in a variety of positions there. And from there is when I got laid off in 2009 and decided I wanted to do something different.
So, so perhaps that was when, I don't know, when you joined the, let's see, I have it, you're retired Sergeant First Class after 22 years, right? In the Army Reserve. So was that when you joined that?
No.
No, this was like before all that.
Way before all
Wow.
that. So I actually joined the service in 1977.
Okay.
Yeah. And at the time, it was like the last year or two of the Women's Army Corps. You've heard of WACS before?
Sure, yeah.
So they're no longer any WACS. After about 2 years, they actually combined women with men, but when I went through basic training, it was all women or all men. And I really didn't know what I wanted to do. I wanted an adventure, but I needed the money. And they were looking for women to be typists. They gave you $500 to sign up. And then over your first 3 years, you got like $500 a year. Well, back in 77, it was enough to buy a Pinto. So I needed a car.
Pinto.
So it was a down payment and a payment on a car. But what I realized is I liked the regiment. The first time I actually got some exposure to what I learned later was human resources was as a result of being responsible for onboarding soldiers when they came in. My first job was at a reception station, and it's when you first go in and you first fill out your papers and get your uniforms and all that. I ended up working there, and that job is very much like doing orientation for a new hire in a corporate or a college environment. Right. So I had in my 22-year career probably about 10, 15 military occupational specialties. So it's called an MOS. So the last one I had was civil affairs. I would go where the opportunities were, and then for you to be able to do your job, they send you to school. So it's that lifelong learning thing. So I went to civil affairs school myself first, and then I happened to be in a civil affairs training unit. And after a while, through attrition, I ended up being responsible for a building at Fort Dix. We actually would drill at another location, but our school was at Fort Dix. And the person who ran the school retired, and I was the most senior person, so they said, "Sergeant Ray, you're now responsible for this school."
Okay.
So what civil affairs is, they used to call them military governors, like in World War II. We would blow up something and then help them rebuild. If there were a natural disaster someplace in the world, and we would send like the Army Corps of Engineers to try to help people to rebuild their homeland. It's also learning about the culture of other organizations as well. So this particular unit I was responsible for did the non-commissioned officers. So there was an officer school, and then there was schools for the soldiers, and I was responsible for training the soldiers.
Wow. So did you enjoy that?
I loved that.
Yes.
I loved it. It was tough being a woman, first of all, and being responsible for a squad, which was mostly men in most cases. When we went away to train, there's 2 weeks you do during the summer. And when you go away to train for those 2 weeks, very often I was the only female with about 25, 30 men, or one of two. And the most difficult thing about that is if we were in a building with barracks, the women had to have their entire floor. So it might have been 25, 30 beds, 2 women on the floor by themselves, and the guys would have to double up.
Sure.
If there were porta potties, if we went out to the field, one had to be designated for the women. So you've got the 25 other guys using one and the 2 women using that. So we got harassed a little bit because it always looked like we were getting privileges that they didn't have.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, now at the end of our interview here, I'd like to ask you about maybe your passions. Now, obviously, you're a lifetime learner, and you have done so many different things. Where do you see yourself going, and what are some of your interests that you want to pursue now?
That's a very good question. I'm always open for new opportunities. And this new job I have is an opportunity for opportunities.
Yeah.
I always like to stretch myself and learn something that I don't know or in a different environment that I was in before. I don't like to get comfortable. I'd like to
Right.
have a little bit of an edge and want to learn something new. So this is what this job affords me. It's a totally different environment, even though it's the same. Um, Human resources is the same at most places, but what's different is how you administer it. So I have to learn a whole lot of new things. I have to learn new people. I've met a lot of people in the 6 weeks I've been here, and remembering the names and what departments and what they do, that's a
Absolutely.
challenge, yeah.
Absolutely.
And this is a good time to be in community colleges. There is the there's the grant that allows for anybody who pretty much wants to go to school to go to school. There is an effort to work with the industry to make sure that there are apprenticeship programs. So for people that don't want to get a 4-year degree ultimately, but just want to go to work, community colleges is where they get that. So it's just kind of a cool place to be right now.
Yeah. Well, we are very lucky to have you.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. Welcome to CCM, and
you.
thank you very much for joining us.
It was my pleasure.
This has been another edition of CCM All Access. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.